What impact does alcohol have on the sex drive of both men and women? Let's talk about it today on this episode of Christian Date Coach. Let's hit it. What's up, everybody? My name is Dr. Phoenix Singh. I want to warmly welcome you, as always, to this episode of Christian Date Coach. If you enjoy our content, please do subscribe to our channel and hit that bell so you get notifications every time we post new original content. You can go ahead and follow me on these social media accounts below. If you do enjoy or you want to contribute to the conversation, please do feel free to comment below. We always love to hear from you, especially if you've got ideas for other videos that you would like our team to be able to make for you. So as you know, one of the things that I love talking about is anything in terms of the evidence base, right? In terms of evidence-based literature that has to do with attraction, with dating, and with relationships. I find it interesting in the church that a lot of people talk about the concept of singleness. A lot of people talk about relationships and marriage. A lot of people are going to be quoting Corinthians and Ephesians and these sorts of things. But very few people actually talk about the literature to be able to help Christian men and women kind of understand ourselves better as well as the opposite sex better. And this is really one of the core functions of this channel. And this is one of the reasons why we have, we go on everything from topics like, do I believe in the concept of a soulmate? Do I think that that's biblically based? To things that are very practical, like the relationship between sex drive and alcohol and the differences in terms of the function of alcohol in men and in women. And really, the thing to talk about here today is the effects of alcohol on testosterone. Now, there's a reason, right, why men are classically in culture perceived to be oversexed relative to women insofar as having significantly higher sex drive. And the reason is significantly higher amounts of testosterone. So prenatally, it's between 4 to 6 weeks, essentially, that genes are an amazing thing, right? And of course, men and women have, different chromosomal patterns, right? So women have 2 X's chromosomes, right? And men have an X and a Y. And so what happens is that the Y chromosome basically, turns on the testosterone, super drive, light switch, and a ton of testosterone gets released into the body. And this has an impact on how it is that our brain forms, which we can talk about some other time. It's, to me, one of the most fascinating things, which makes just a tremendous amount of sense about, men and women and the differences between men and women, to be able to understand the impact of sex hormones like testosterone and estrogen prenatally, when the brain is actually, getting constructed itself, and then later on during adolescence, when we're actually coming to, going through puberty and coming towards, adulthood and maturation. So what happens though, right, is that, men, because we have basically, prenatally even been structured by testosterone, we're very sensitive to it, and it results in things like us being more likely to be physically aggressive. Women tend to be more relationally aggressive. Men also tend to have a higher sex drive. This isn't meant to say that women have a low sex drive by any means, but comparatively speaking, in the aggregate, the average guy's sex drive is significantly higher, right? So what happens is that when a man drinks alcohol, even though oftentimes people would think, well, a lot of people, they become disinhibited when they drink alcohol, right? And which is true, right? And so they're more likely to kind of make decisions to be able to engage in sexual behavior. But ironically, it actually decreases men's sex drive. And it does that because alcohol suppresses testosterone development in the testes, right, in men. It also makes it so that men have an inability to keep an erection. And it's interesting because men who become clinically addicted to alcohol tend to develop, more pronounced mammaries, so people colloquially would say man boobs, right, as well as wider hips, which usually is something where when you take a look in the aggregate at the hips of men and the hips of women, women usually have wider hips than men. But because of this testosterone suppressing impact of alcohol, alcoholics tend to have wider hips, and I find all this very interesting. So the way that alcohol works in the brain is that in the brain you got these 2 big amino acids. One of them is called GABA, the other one's called glutamate. And basically, when they travel down, I talk about neurons a lot in other videos, right? So you can watch other videos and get a whole breakdown of how neurons work in the brain. But basically what happens is neurotransmitters kind of flow down. You've heard of them, serotonin, dopamine, you name them, right? And they bind with these little things. They look like tree branches. They're called dendrites. They bind with the dendrites of neurons, and they basically have one of two functions, right? Either to tell the cell to fire an electrical impulse down the axon or do not fire an electrical impulse down the axon. And glutamate tells the cell fire, and GABA says don't fire. They're the two main amino acids, right, that are in the brain that serve this neurotransmitter function. So what's interesting is that when you take a look at the receptor for GABA, just like most receptors on neurons, what you end up finding is that they kind of have, think about it almost like several different shapes, right? Where you could have like a square come and dock, or a circle come and dock, or a triangle come and dock, whatever it is. But regardless of what docks with the receptor, it's going to communicate the same information, okay? And so what happens with GABA is that GABA fits into the exact same receptor that ethanol, right? So in alcohol, that ethanol usually binds with, and has the same effect, right? So because of that, when you're drinking alcohol, right, and the ethanol goes through your blood-brain barrier, it just starts to bind throughout your brain with GABA receptors, right? And what that does is basically tells your brain, don't fire. And this results in everything kind of chilling out. And this is not only in a good way, but also this is the reason why people slur speech, the reason why people sometimes, they lose coordination because, in their cerebellum and in other parts of their brain that have to do with motoric activity, with motor activity, they have a lack of coordination, etc., right? But this is essentially what happens when you drink alcohol. It kind of, brings everything down in terms of the brain's ability to kind of fire efficiently. And this is one of the reasons why you tend to see all this disinhibition and people kind of just doing stuff. It's not that they know that they don't know that things are wrong to do, like texting and driving or driving drunk and these things. If you ask them about it when they're intoxicated, they know what they're doing is incorrect and wrong. They just don't care about the consequences. Not because they're bad human beings. This is just one of the effects that alcohol has on you, especially in an intoxicated state, okay? In any case, that disinhibition effect happens in both men and women. But in men, in terms of the effects of testosterone, right, of alcohol on testosterone, right, you get that decrease in sex drive. But interestingly, right, in women, drinking alcohol increases sex drive. And the impact is greatest during the follicular phase of ovulation. All right. And it's interesting because what you end up seeing amongst women who are intoxicated is more sexual aggression, right? Women are also more easily aroused. We'll talk later in another episode about chocolate and things about chocolate, but it's interesting because usually what do you pair with chocolate? Well, a lot of the time, especially if you conceptualize this as a romantic thing, it would be champagne. Right? So some kind of alcohol is kind of paired with this, right? Champagne is very interesting because when you look at the biological effect, it results in kind of a temporary increase in rates of testosterone in women. And this is quite fascinating, right? Because usually, you think about these things being romantic, usually because you think about it resulting in sexual relations in some regard, right? Or certainly an increased sexual arousal. It's like chocolate dipped strawberries and some kind of champagne, right? These sorts of things kind of seem to go together to a lot of people, especially in that romantic context, right? But this is the very interesting relationship between alcohol and the sex drive, which is really mediated by the effects of testosterone. All right, everybody, thank you so much for joining me for this brief video today. As always, if you have other things you'd like me to chat about based on the research literature, feel free to post them below in the comments. If you did enjoy this video, be sure to give me a like. I'd really appreciate it, as would my team, because it really helps us on our YouTube algorithm to be able to essentially get seen and to help even more people, regardless of whether they're a believer or not. Now, if you're interested in me coming and speaking with your congregation, be they of singles or of individuals in relationships or to just everybody overall, it would be a real blessing to be able to do that. Same thing if you're interested in one-on-one or group-based coaching. Regardless of where you are in your relationship journey, it would be a pleasure to be able to work with you, to be able to figure out what your goals are, and then how we can use the evidence base to be able to get you there. So please do feel free to contact me via my website below, and we can chat some more about that. All right, folks, sign off for the day. Thank you again for joining me. God bless you, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye. Thank you so much for stopping by. If you enjoyed that episode and you'd like to see more original content, then please do click on one of the links right here. I hope to see you in the next one.